welcome to the Guitar Department. I'm your host, Devon Miller. Now, as I said in the second episode, music is made up of three main components. There is the rhythm, the melody, and the harmony. And so far we've been focusing on the harmony component, which is the chords that we play. But today we're going to start talking about melody. That's right, today we are going solo. Now before we get started, let's make sure we're in tune together. So here is my first string or high E string. Here is the second string or B string. Here is the third string or G string. Here is the fourth string or D string. The fifth string or A string. And finally, the low E or sixth string. So soloing on a musical instrument is usually based around a collection of notes called scales. And there are tons of different scales out there that work against various chords. In fact, there is so much information out there that you could spend years studying the music theory behind what scales work with what chords. But there is one scale that is used in probably 90% of all of popular music that you hear these days, and that is a pentatonic scale. So the most famous scale is probably the major scale. This is the one that everybody's heard of. It's the one that goes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It has 7 notes because we don't count the last do because it's the same note as the first do. So there's 7 up to that next do. A pentatonic scale, on the other hand, only has 5 notes, hence the pent in pentatonic. Now, in order to play the right scale with the right chords, musicians will typically refer to this as the key of the song. So there are a few different shapes that you can use to play a pentatonic scale. This first shape is super easy, and you'll find it in several popular songs. It's called the minor box position, is what it's typically referred to. So we're going to be building a minor scale. We're going to start, in this case, by placing our first finger on the 5th fret of the low E string. Then we're going to place our pinky on the 8th fret of the low E string. So far we've got 5th fret, our 8th fret. Now we're going to put our first finger on the 5th fret of the A string. And then we're going to put our ring finger on the 7th fret of the A string. Then our first finger is going to go on the 5th fret of the D string. And then finally our ring finger is going to go on the 7th fret of the D string. And there we have a full octave. That is a pentatonic scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're back to the octave and the pattern starts over again. And of course, we can take this all the way up the rest of the neck by continuing on with placing our first finger on the 5th fret of the G string, and then our ring finger on the 7th fret of the G string, then our first finger on the 5th fret of the B string. Now we're going to go back to our pinky on the 8th fret of the B string, then our first finger on the 5th fret of the high E string, And finally, our pinky is going to go on the 8th fret of the high E string. So we've got 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. And make sure that you're playing the 8th fret with your pinky and the 7th fret with your ring finger. Don't do a thing where you're going, because not only is that a big stretch, but you're also, if you use your pinky for those notes, then your ring finger is ready to go on that 7th fret when you get to that. And then your pinky is ready to catch that 8th fret again before you go back to the A. So we just played an A minor pentatonic scale. And the name of the scale is derived from whatever note your first finger is playing on the low E string. So since our first finger is starting on the 5th fret of the E, so if we go back to what we learned last week about the note names on the low E string, we start off open E, then we got F on the 1st fret, F sharp or G flat on the 2nd fret, G on the 3rd, G sharp or A flat on the 4th, and then we're at A on the 5th. So that determines the name of the scale that we have. It's an A, and because it's and that would be an A minor scale, and it would work great over an A minor chord. So I just recorded me playing that A minor chord, and now if I play that chord back, kind of gives you an idea of how that would sound in the context of a song. Now, of course, this shape, just like with our bar chords, we can move this shape up and down the neck and change the key. So say instead we want to play out of G minor. So let's move the shape down to where our first finger is on the 3rd fret of the low E, because we got E, F, F sharp, G. And of course that would work over an G minor scale. All right, so now I'm going to record me playing a G minor chord. And now if we play that back, or say you want to move it up to C minor. So we'll go G, A, B, C. We'll be on the 8th fret. So let me record a C minor chord. Play that back. So this is the most commonly used scale in most popular music. You're going to hear this in several types of songs, including Back in Black. You know, same scale shape. It's just we're not fretting the first finger because it would be behind the nut. Another one would be Bon Jovi's You Give Love a Bad Name. I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. And finally, play that funky music. And even during the solo. But now we're going to take a short break, but we will be right back, so please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Guitar Department. Once again, I'm your host, Devon Miller. Now, this next shape I'm going to show you has more of a major key flavor to it. And it's also going to move up and down the neck a little bit. So to build this next shape, we are going to take our first finger once again and place it on the 5th fret of the low E. So we're playing an A note again. I'm going to take our ring finger and place it on the 7th fret of the low E. Now we're going to slide our ring finger up to the 9th fret of the low E. And we're going to take our first finger and place it on the 7th fret of the A string. Then our ring finger is going to go on the 9th fret of the A. First finger is going to go on the 7th fret of the D string. And we have our pentatonic scale. We just played an A major pentatonic scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. And now we're back to an A again, and the pattern starts over. And of course, we can extend this pattern the rest of the way up the neck. So our first finger is on the 7th fret of the D string. Ring finger goes on the 9th fret of the D string. Slide our ring finger up to the 11th fret of the D. Now we're going to push our first finger on the 9th fret of the G string. Ring finger goes on the 11th fret of the G. Now, first finger goes on the 10th fret of the B string because it's tuned a little bit differently than the rest of the string, so we've got to adjust. Now, ring finger goes on the 12th fret of the B string. Now we're going to slide up to the 14th fret of the B, and then first finger goes on the 12th fret of the high E. Ring finger goes on the 14th fret of the high E, and then ring finger slides all the way up to the 17th fret of the high E to get that high A. And we just played an A major scale all the way up the neck. 5, 7, slide up to 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, slide up to 11, 9, 11, 10, 12, because the B string is tuned slightly differently, slide up to 14, 12, 14, and slide up to 17. And of course, we can take that down as well. And you can either slide, coming down, you can either slide your ring finger if that's more comfortable, or you can slide your first finger. If that's more comfortable. And of course, this scale will work great over an A major chord. So let's just record an A major into our looper. And then if we play that back, and of course, you can take this same pattern and move it to a different fret, and all of a sudden you're in a different key. So once again, you know, if we wanted to play a G major scale using this pattern, we just go to the 3rd fret of the low E string and start our pattern. So let's record a G major chord into the looper. Play that back. Or if we wanted to play a D major scale, we just start on the 10th fret of the low E string. So let's record a D chord in there. D major chord. Play that back. Now, I'm sure you've heard this scale pattern in a lot of popular songs as well, like Amazing Grace, for instance. So if we're out of the key of F, so right here's where we're starting in the scale pattern. Or My Girl. Sunshine on a cloudy day. Or Angel in the Centerfold by the J. Giles Band. That's out of the key of G. So we're starting at this part of the scale. And even Old MacDonald Had a Farm. So we'll start in A. Now, we are going to take another short break, but we will be right back, so please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Guitar Department. Once again, I'm your host, Devon Miller. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about today is how each of these scale patterns that I just showed you are not limited to strictly major and minor. So this shape is not strictly a minor shape. And this shape is not strictly a major shape. So I'm dipping a little bit into the music theory here because a major scale in one key can be used as a minor scale in another key. And we refer to that as being the relative minor. And it's really easy to figure out. So let's take our first scale pattern, starting again, first finger on the 5th fret, we have an A minor scale. Because our first finger is playing an A note. But if we start that scale on our pinky instead, now we're playing a C note first, and now we've got a C major scale, and we haven't changed our finger pattern at all. We're just starting on a different note and ending on a different note. So instead of playing first finger and ending there, we're starting with our pinky and ending there. And of course, it helps with whatever chord you're playing behind it as well. So, let's say we record an A minor chord. Play that back and play this. It definitely has a minor flavor to it. Now let's record a C major chord. Play that back and play the same scale pattern. See how the same shape completely changes its mood depending on what chord is behind it. That is known as, the major scale and the relative minor scale. And we can do the same trick using the other scale pattern. So if we start on the 3rd fret of the low E string and play our second pattern, we have a G major scale. But now if we start on the note 3 frets below that G note, so 1, 2, 3, and actually it would be the open E, the open E string. Now we get an E minor scale. So let's record a G major chord in. Play that back. Play the scale shape. And now let's record an E minor chord into the looper. Play that back. Play the exact same scale shape, same notes. And it gives it the exact same scale shape, a minor feel. An example of using the first pattern in a major pentatonic way would be the opening riff of Ramblin' Man by the Allman Brothers. That's in a G major chord, or G major key, and we would be using the E minor pentatonic, starting on the 12th fret, but because we're over a G major, it gives it a major feel because our pinky would be starting on a G note and that pattern. And a classic pattern of the second scale shape being used in a minor flavor is the opening riff of Carry On My Wayward Son. Now this may look slightly different because I'm starting the pattern, it's a C. It's a C major scale, just like if I started on the 8th fret here. But I'm actually starting on the C that's on the A string. So A, B flat, B, C, so 3rd fret of the A string, and playing it there. And the opening riff of Carry On My Wayward Son starts on the low A, on the E string. And it's got a little extra note in there that's not in our scale pattern, but got to have it in there to make it sound right. And you can also switch between major and minor in the same solo. So like China Grove by the Doobie Brothers. There we're in an E major pentatonic. Again, we're starting on the E of the A string. And then about halfway through the solo, he switches to the E minor pentatonic. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you've been enjoying this series so far. This has been Devon Miller for the Guitar Department, and I will see you next time.